I accidentally kissed the Alpha Mafia boss on international TV, now I got bullied. Luca Moretti had always believed that people like Adriano Valente existed only on screens, untouchable, distant, unreal. Yet tonight, Luca stood barely 3 meters away from him. The television studio buzzed with restrained chaos. Cameramen adjusted lenses, producers whispered through headsets, assistants darted between cables like nervous birds. Red lights blinked on and off as the final checks were made for a broadcast watched by millions across continents. Luca adjusted his earpiece with trembling fingers. Just another night, he told himself. He was only a junior assistant, a nobody. His job was to stay invisible, to pass notes, manage translations, and fade into the background. That's what Omegas like him did best, survive quietly. But when Adriano Valente walked onto the set, the air itself seemed to shift. The Alpha Mafia boss didn't need an introduction. His presence alone commanded silence. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in black, he moved with the calm confidence of someone who had never once doubted his right to exist at the top of the food chain. His eyes were sharp, steel gray, assessing everything without effort. Power clung to him like a scent. Luca swallowed hard. He smells like winter, Luca thought faintly, startled by his own awareness. Suppressants dulled Omega instincts, but they didn't erase them completely. Adriano took his seat opposite the host, Mara Klein, crossing his legs with practiced ease. He neither smiled nor frowned, his expression permanently carved into something cold and unreadable. 30 seconds, the director called. Luca stepped closer to the stage, clipboard pressed against his chest, listening intently through his earpiece as translations flowed in. His heart beat faster than necessary. Don't stare. Don't trip. Don't exist. The red light blinked on. They were live. Mara's voice filled the studio, confident and bright. Tonight, we welcome one of the most controversial figures in modern economics and international influence, Mr. Adriano Valente. Applause followed, polite but hesitant. Adriano inclined his head slightly. As the interview began, Luca found himself fascinated despite his fear. Adriano spoke calmly, answering questions with precision. He never raised his voice, never stumbled. He dismantled accusations with logic alone, leaving no room for attack. The world watched him like a predator behind glass. 10 minutes in, disaster struck. A stagehand moved too quickly. The cable shifted. Mara's heel caught. Her balance faltered. Oh. Instinct took over. Luca rushed forward without thinking. Careful. At the same moment, Adriano stood up, reaching out to steady the host. 3 movements. 1 second. Collision. Luca slammed into Adriano's chest, his clipboard clattering to the floor. The momentum threw him forward. And his lips pressed against Adriano Valente's. The studio fell into a vacuum. Time fractured. Luca's mind went blank. Warm. That was his first thought. Warm lips. Firm. Still. Adriano froze. Cameras zoomed in automatically, trained to capture reaction. Gasps rippled through the audience. Luca realized what had happened a fraction of a second too late. Oh. He tried to pull away, mortified, but Adriano's hand closed around his wrist. Not tight, not gentle, just there. Grounding. Unyielding. Their eyes met. Adriano's pupils were blown wide, alpha instincts flaring before discipline crushed them back down. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Shock, anger, curiosity, recognition. The contact lasted barely 2 seconds. 2 seconds too long. Cut! Someone screamed from offstage. The red light snapped off. But the damage was done. Luca stumbled backward, face burning, heart hammering so violently he thought he might faint. I'm sorry, I didn't. His voice broke. Adriano released him slowly. The Alpha straightened his suit as if nothing had happened, but the tension radiating from him was unmistakable. The studio erupted. Producers shouted. Staff panicked. Mara stood frozen, hand over her mouth. Luca wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He bowed repeatedly, voice shaking. I'm so sorry, Mr. Valente, Adriano looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly he said, it was an accident. The words were calm. The tone was not. Security escorted Luca off stage immediately. Behind the scenes, Luca collapsed into a chair, hands shaking uncontrollably. His ears rang. His throat closed. Through the glass wall, he could see Adriano still seated, composed once more, answering questions as if nothing had occurred. As if Luca hadn't just kissed him on international television. A producer stormed toward Luca. Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't mean to. That doesn't matter. Social media is already exploding. Someone shoved a phone into Luca's hands. The clip had been posted less than 60 seconds ago. Omega kisses Alpha Mafia boss live. Setup or seduction? Is Valente claimed? The comments scrolled endlessly. Cruel. Mocking. Violent. Luca's stomach dropped. His sense suppressant faltered under the stress, panic blooming through him like fire. He pressed his arms around himself, trying to breathe. Across the studio, unseen by everyone else, Adriano Valente watched the reflection of Luca's shaking figure in the glass. His jaw tightened. The accidental kiss replayed in his mind, not as a scandal, not as a threat, but as something disturbingly human. And for the first time in years, Adriano Valente felt the world tilt. Not because of enemies, not because of power, but because a trembling Omega had crashed into his life. And the entire world had seen it happen. Luca Moretti woke to a nightmare he hadn't even known existed. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Every notification felt like a hammer striking his chest. Social media notifications, work emails, missed calls, all of them shouting the same accusation: Luca kissed the Alpha Mafia boss. He scrolled through the posts with trembling fingers. Screenshots of the kiss had gone viral within minutes, and millions had already seen it. Who is he? Omega climbing his way up. Disgusting. The comments were vicious. They dissected every movement, every expression, and every imagined intention. Some were cruelly eroticized, others disgusted, all relentless. Memes turned his blunder into a public spectacle. Even his co-workers were not immune. Someone had made a parody account claiming to be Luca and posting fabricated confessions. Luca pressed his hands over his face, trying to shut it all out. But social media didn't sleep, and neither did the gossip mill. At the office it was worse. Whispers followed him down the hallways. The receptionist wouldn't look him in the eye. One of his colleagues smirked and muttered, loud enough for others to hear, "Hey, Omega, Valente's next victim, huh?" His stomach churned. Luca's manager called him into the office, frowning over a cup of coffee. "Luca, you need to go home today. Until this blows over." "Go home?" Luca's voice cracked. "You're just going to let them bully me online?" The manager shook his head. "I can't control social media. And you were on camera. Some things we can't undo." Luca felt dizzy. His hands shook uncontrollably. He wanted to scream, to vanish, to crawl under the desk and hide forever. But the world refused to let him. Outside the office, paparazzi had already gathered. Cameras flashed as soon as he stepped out. Phones were shoved into his face. Questions shouted in multiple languages. "Do you regret the kiss? Was it consensual? Are you dating him now?" Luca's knees nearly buckled. Heat rose uncomfortably in his body, suppressed instincts reacting violently to the alpha scent that seemed to haunt him even through the screen. The first night was the worst. Someone had posted his home address online. Anonymous accounts sent him pictures of Adriano, edited to make it seem intimate, paired with threats. "Stay away from him or else. Alpha doesn't like mistakes. You'll pay for this, Omega." Luca curled into himself on his small couch, trying to control the tremors running through him. His body betrayed him. Heat flickered unexpectedly, and for the first time, he realized the full weight of what had happened. It wasn't just a viral video. It was a public declaration. And it marked him. The next morning, things escalated further. Emails from HR warned him of reputation risk. His co-workers avoided the elevator when he tried to enter. Someone left a note under his office chair. "Slut Omega." He wanted to burn it. He wanted to disappear. Even at the grocery store, people stared. Phones were raised. Whispers followed him. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a part of him couldn't stop thinking about the Alpha. Adriano Valente. The memory of that brief contact, that strange warmth, and the way Adriano's eyes had scanned him with something unreadable haunted him. He's cold, dangerous, untouchable, and yet, I can't stop thinking about him, Luca realized in horror. By the third day, Luca's anxiety had escalated into something more physical. His heart raced constantly. He couldn't eat properly. Sleep was fractured by nightmares of flashing cameras and Adriano's calm, commanding presence. Every time he closed his eyes, he relived the kiss. And then the heat began, stronger, impossible to ignore. The suppressant medication he had relied on for years couldn't entirely mask the reaction. His body betrayed him at the worst moments. "Not now, not here," he whispered into the darkness of his apartment. It was too late. The heat was an involuntary signal, an Omega reaction to the Alpha's scent, lingering in his memory, in the images online, in every whispered comment. He felt cornered, vulnerable, alone. But somewhere Adriano Valente seemed untouched by the chaos. The Alpha's image on news sites and social media was calm, unflinching. He didn't defend Luca. He didn't deny the kiss. He simply existed, untouchable, untarnished. Luca's fear twisted into something more complicated: awe, fascination, fear that bordered on something darker. The days blurred together. Work suspended him. Social media harassment became relentless. He stopped opening his email. His phone became an instrument of torture. Every time he glanced at a headline, his stomach dropped. Every notification could mean another public humiliation. And then one evening, as Luca tried to escape into the silence of his apartment, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A small envelope had been slipped under his door. Inside, a single note: "Be careful. Not everyone will forgive a mistake like this." The handwriting was precise, elegant, but the threat behind it was unmistakable. Luca sank to the floor, trembling, utterly powerless. He wanted to call someone. Anyone. The police? Friends? HR. But the thought of Adriano Valente loomed over everything. The Alpha hadn't responded publicly. He hadn't sent threats. He hadn't even acknowledged Luca directly. And yet Luca felt it, a presence, cold and consuming, that made every instinct in his body scream that he was being watched. Luca realized, with sinking clarity, that his life had changed forever. The accidental kiss hadn't just been a moment of clumsiness. It had marked him. It had put him in the path of a predator whose world was entirely different from his own. And Luca had no idea if he would survive it. Luca Moretti didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. The viral video had left him raw, exposed, and paranoid. Every knock on his apartment door, every shadow, every unfamiliar sound sent his pulse into overdrive. He kept imagining Adriano Valente's cold, gray eyes on him, analyzing him as though the Alpha could see every secret thought and fear he'd ever had. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was obsession. A week after the kiss, Luca had tried to return to work. HR insisted gently that he rejoin the team. But as soon as he entered the office, whispers began again, louder than ever. Every glance felt loaded, every smirk deliberate. Someone had stuck a post-it on his monitor. "You kissed him. You're disgusting." Luca grabbed the note and crumpled it in his fist, a burning heat rising in his chest. It wasn't just humiliation. It was terror. By late afternoon, he found himself standing in a quiet corner of a small cafe near his apartment, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold. He didn't want to think about the viral video, about the messages, about the notes left under his door. He just wanted to disappear. And then he heard it, a deep, deliberate voice, calm, controlled, and utterly terrifying. "You've been avoiding me." Luca's body froze. He turned, heart hammering against his ribs. Adriano Valente stood there. Even in casual clothes, the Alpha radiated power. His black leather jacket, tailored pants, and perfectly fitted shirt did nothing to soften the intensity of his presence. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply was. Luca tried to speak. Nothing came out. Adriano didn't wait. He pulled out a chair across from Luca and sat down, the leather creaking softly. He didn't order anything. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge the cafe's other patrons who were beginning to stare. "Sit," Adriano said. "Not a request." Luca swallowed hard and obeyed. "You caused quite a stir," Adriano said, his voice low, measured. "Do you know how reckless your actions were?" It wasn't intentional," Luca blurted out. "I didn't mean to kiss you. It was an accident, I swear. I was trying to." "Steady the host," Adriano finished for him, tilting his head slightly. "I know." Luca's face burned. How could he know? Did the camera show that much? Adriano studied him in silence, gray eyes unflinching. For the first time, Luca felt like he was completely exposed, not just publicly but personally. It was terrifying. "Then why aren't you denying it?" Luca demanded, his voice trembling. "Why haven't you?" "I don't know, said anything. People are mocking me, threatening me." Adriano's gaze sharpened. "Because denying it would put you in more danger." Luca blinked. "What? How? What do you mean?" "You have no idea the enemies I have," Adriano said, leaning back. "If I publicly denied it, it would paint you as someone who sought me out deliberately. That makes you a target. Do you understand?" Luca couldn't find words. Every thought seemed shallow and fragile in the presence of the Alpha. Adriano's hand moved, just slightly, and rested on the edge of the table, palm down, fingers straight and tense. The movement wasn't threatening, but it was undeniably there, and Luca felt a shiver run down his spine. "You are not safe," Adriano continued. "Not from the media, not from the people who want to exploit you, and certainly not from the enemies I have." Luca's stomach churned. He wanted to protest, to argue, to tell Adriano he didn't need his protection. But the truth was raw and undeniable. He did. He couldn't survive this alone. I don't want to cause trouble for you," Luca said softly. Everyone's laughing at me and now." Adriano's eyes softened, just barely. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Do you think I care about what the world thinks of me?" Adriano asked quietly. "Do you think I care about gossip?" Luca shook his head. I guess not. But I'm not you. I can't handle this." Adriano leaned forward slightly. The intensity of his gaze pinned Luca in place. "Which is why I am here. Because I will handle it for you." The words didn't sound kind. They sounded like a command. But Luca's heart, against his will, felt relief. And a flicker of something else, fear laced with curiosity. "Call this number," Adriano said, sliding a small card across the table. "If anyone threatens you, if anyone comes too close, you call me." Luca picked up the card with shaking fingers. I can't." "You will," Adriano interrupted, voice sharp. "You will call. Or they won't just laugh at you, they'll hurt you. Do you understand?" "Yes," Luca whispered, utterly overwhelmed. Adriano's gray eyes softened fractionally. "Good. Now go home. And stay alive." The Alpha stood, his presence already beginning to fill the room like a shadow moving through sunlight. Without another word, he walked out, leaving Luca frozen in the chair, the card burning cold in his palm. For the first time in days, Luca felt the crushing weight of fear paired with a strange, undeniable pull. He didn't understand it, couldn't explain it. All he knew was this: Adriano Valente was dangerous. And somehow, in a way Luca could not yet name, he had just become a part of Luca's life. And Luca knew, without a doubt, that the world would never allow him to forget it. Luca Moretti had always thought he could endure humiliation. He could take whispered jokes, mocking glances, the occasional cruel comment. But humiliation paired with danger was something entirely different. It started subtly. A note slipped under his apartment door. "Stay away from him." He crumpled it and threw it in the trash, telling himself it was just another prank. But then the first brick came through his living room window. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the broken glass, shards glinting under the streetlight. Tied to the brick was a note in precise, elegant handwriting. "You're mine, Omega. Don't forget it." Luca collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently. He pressed his hands to his chest as the reality hit. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was threat. He tried to call the police. The operators listened politely but warned him that without concrete proof, threats of this nature would be difficult to pursue. Social media accounts were mostly anonymous. Messages vanished as fast as they appeared. For the first time, Luca felt utterly helpless. And then, reluctantly, he remembered the card Adriano had handed him in the cafe. The card he had promised would keep him safe. With trembling fingers he dialed the number. The line clicked. A calm, controlled male voice answered immediately. "This is Luca." His voice sounded smaller than he felt. "You've called?" Adriano said. No greeting. No questioning. Just acknowledgement. "Yes. There, my apartment, someone threw a brick." Adriano's response was immediate. "Stay where you are. Do not leave. I'm coming." 10 minutes later, black sedans pulled up outside Luca's apartment building. The world seemed to blur as Adriano Valente himself stepped out, his coat collar raised, eyes scanning the streets like a predator marking its territory. Luca's knees buckled. I can't go with you," he stammered. "You are coming," Adriano said flatly. "Now." Luca wanted to argue, wanted to claim independence, but the fear coursing through his veins overrode everything. This was no longer about embarrassment or viral videos. This was about survival. He stepped outside. The air felt heavy. The night was quiet, almost eerily so. Adriano's presence filled the street, commanding attention without effort. The Alpha's gaze swept over Luca, unyielding and unreadable, and Luca felt a shiver run through him that had nothing to do with fear alone. Inside the black sedan, Luca felt the weight of Adriano's presence beside him. They didn't speak. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the engine and Luca's own ragged breathing. When they arrived at Adriano's mansion, Luca was overwhelmed. Security guards flanked every entrance, armed but silent, eyes trained and watchful. The interior was immaculate, modern, cold, and undeniably powerful. Crystal chandeliers reflected pale light across marble floors, while dark wood paneling lent a sense of quiet authority to the space. Adriano gestured toward a guest room. "You will stay here. No exceptions. Guards will be stationed outside." "I'm not your kleptomega," Luca said quickly, panic creeping into his voice. I can stay somewhere else, a hotel?" "No," Adriano's voice was final. "You will stay here. It is safer." "That is not a request." The room was spacious, warm, and strangely comforting. But Luca felt trapped. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly together, trying to process everything. That night, sleep became impossible. Every creak of the mansion, every shadow, every soft footstep outside the door, made him jump. He tried to calm himself, to focus on rational thoughts, but his body betrayed him. The heat surged through him, stronger than ever, triggered by the alpha lingering somewhere nearby. And then he felt it, the quietest of presences moving in the darkness. Adriano. He was sitting in the chair by the window, eyes scanning the night, yet aware of Luca. He didn't speak. He didn't touch. But Luca could feel the alpha's gaze, like a tether keeping him grounded and terrified all at once. "I can't sleep," Luca admitted in a whisper, as if saying it aloud might make it real. "You won't," Adriano said softly, almost contemplatively. "Not while danger exists." The words weren't comforting. But neither were they threatening. They were true. Luca curled into himself, shivering under a thin blanket. Fear, confusion, and an unexplainable pull toward Adriano collided in his chest. His body reacted despite his mind, reacting to the alpha's proximity, to the way the man's scent seemed to fill the room. Adriano did not move closer. He did not speak further. He simply remained, a presence that was at once terrifying, commanding, and incomprehensibly safe. 4 hours, Luca lay awake, heart racing, until dawn crept through the windows. When morning came, Adriano was still there. Coffee in hand, silent, observing. Luca couldn't look away. "You're alive," Adriano said quietly. "That is what matters." Luca swallowed. Thank you." Adriano's eyes softened fractionally. "Do not thank me. You should focus on staying alive. Everything else is secondary." For the first time since the kiss, Luca realized something. He wasn't just surviving by chance anymore. He was surviving because Adriano Valente had chosen, deliberately, to place himself in Luca's path. And whether Luca liked it or not, he was entirely dependent on him. The first morning in Adriano Valente's mansion felt surreal to Luca Moretti. The sun poured through the enormous windows, illuminating floors so polished they reflected every movement. Marble, dark wood, and glass stretched into vast halls, giving the impression of a fortress, cold, untouchable, and entirely owned by the alpha who now commanded Luca's very existence. Luca sat at the edge of a leather sofa, a cup of coffee trembling in his hands. He had barely slept. The night had been long, haunted by the remnants of fear, the vivid replay of social media harassment, and the heavy, almost magnetic presence of Adriano, who had remained in the room, silent but watchful. The mansion was quiet now, but that quiet carried a weight all its own, a constant reminder that he was not free, that he was under the constant gaze of a man whose reputation alone inspired fear and obedience. Adriano appeared in the hallway, impeccably dressed, though casual, a perfectly tailored black shirt and pants, sleeves rolled slightly, revealing the strength of his forearms. His presence filled the room without a sound. Luca felt the pull of him immediately, a mixture of instinctual omega response and human fascination. "Sit down," Adriano said, gesturing toward the dining area. His tone was flat, neutral, but commands from him carried authority Luca couldn't ignore. Luca obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair, hands clasped tightly in his lap. He tried to focus on the breakfast laid out before him, a display of careful attention. Fresh fruit, a neatly plated omelette, coffee steaming in a delicate porcelain cup. It was simple but deliberate, just like everything Adriano did. "You don't have to eat," Adriano said, noting Luca's hesitation. "But I suggest you do. You need strength." Luca nodded, swallowing hard. He wanted to speak, to ask why Adriano was helping him, why he had intervened, why he hadn't just left him to deal with the chaos alone. But the words stuck in his throat. Fear, gratitude, confusion, all mingled in a tight knot. Adriano studied him for a moment, gray eyes unreadable. "Do you understand why you are here?" "Yes," Luca whispered, unsure if he truly did. "Because they were threatening me?" "Partially," Adriano said. You are here because I will not allow anyone to harm what is mine. The words hit Luca like a physical blow. Mine. The thought made his stomach twist. Adriano had never claimed him, never touched him beyond necessity, but the claim in the Alpha's tone was unmistakable. There was no room for argument. Throughout the day, Luca began to explore the mansion, guided silently by Adriano's personal assistant, a sharp-eyed man named Silvio, who seemed to anticipate his every move. Guards were stationed discreetly, watching without intruding, ensuring Luca was never truly alone but also never overly coddled. Meals were delivered, rooms cleaned, messages managed. Every aspect of his life was orchestrated for safety and comfort, yet the mansion never felt warm. It felt precise, efficient, controlled. And Adriano remained nearby. He did not hover, did not press, did not speak unnecessarily, but Luca always felt him. In the way the air shifted when he entered a room, in the way footsteps seemed to echo just a fraction differently when he walked past, in the subtle scent of winter musk and clean soap that clung to him. Luca's feelings became a complex tangle, fear mixed with curiosity, resentment mixed with undeniable fascination, and a strange, new awareness of his body's reaction to Adriano's proximity. Days passed, and Luca began to notice small things about the Alpha that no one else could see. The way Adriano never truly relaxed even in private. The way his gaze softened when he thought Luca wasn't watching. The meticulous care in everything he did, as though he controlled the world around him to prevent chaos from touching him, or Luca. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. One evening, Luca found himself in the library, an enormous room filled with books, dark wood, and the faint scent of leather and ink. He was nervously trying to focus on a book to calm himself when Adriano entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "You spend too much time hiding," Adriano said softly. "Oh, I'm trying to survive," Luca replied. His voice was small. "I don't know how to live in a place like this." "You adjust," Adriano said simply. "Or you fail. This isn't your world, Luca. You survive by understanding it, not resisting it." Luca's throat went dry. I don't even know how to be safe. Or what to do if..." Adriano's gaze softened slightly, catching him off guard. "You will. I'm here." The words were simple. No frills, no romance, no tenderness. But they carried a weight of promise. Luca felt his chest tighten. He wanted to speak, to ask why, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he looked down, noticing the small gesture Adriano made almost imperceptibly, his hand brushing against the edge of a book as he passed, a silent mark of awareness that Luca existed, and mattered, even in the Alpha's vast, unyielding world. Days turned into a routine. Luca learned to navigate the mansion. He learned to manage the guards, to anticipate Adriano's needs without being asked, to stay out of the Alpha's way when necessary. And in those quiet moments he also began to notice something unexpected. He wasn't just afraid anymore. He was aware. Every glance, every movement, every word from Adriano sent a ripple through him that he didn't fully understand. The fear remained, but it was tempered by a strange pull, a fascination he couldn't ignore. Adriano, for his part, remained distant, but always present. He didn't coddle, didn't demand affection, didn't invade Luca's space unnecessarily. And yet, his mere presence filled the mansion with a tension that made Luca's pulse quicken without warning. One night, as Luca lay in his guest room, he realized that the fear and vulnerability he had felt the first night had transformed. It was still fear, but now it was mixed with something else. Something like anticipation. Something like longing. And he hated himself for it. Because Adriano Valente was dangerous. He was untouchable. He was cold and powerful and impossible. Yet somehow, Luca had begun to want him. The mansion had felt safe, controlled, secure. But Luca Moretti quickly learned that in Adriano Valente's world, danger never slept. It started with the messages, thinly veiled threats that Adriano dismissed as routine intelligence reports. Luca didn't understand the significance at first. To him, a few cryptic warnings on a tablet looked like paranoia. But Adriano's frown was constant, his jaw tight, his every movement precise and tense. "Victor Russo," Adriano muttered one morning, scanning the encrypted communication. "He's testing boundaries." Luca frowned. "Who is he?" "The one who wants to prove he's stronger than me," Adriano said flatly, gray eyes narrowing. "And he's chosen you as leverage." Luca felt his stomach drop. "Me? Why would?" "Because you're an Omega," Adriano interrupted, tone flat, precise. "And because the world watches everything we do. He wants to use you to make me move recklessly. You understand?" Luca nodded weakly. I should have been more careful. I should have stayed invisible. But in this life, invisibility was impossible. The first attack came at night. Luca had been alone in the study, trying to distract himself with work he didn't truly understand, when the sound of the door being forced open shattered the quiet. Shouts followed. Shadows moved quickly in the dim light. Luca froze, terror rooting him to the spot. Get him, a rough voice barked. Two men lunged forward. Luca screamed. He tried to run, but one of them grabbed him from behind, pulling him into the shadows. His world became chaos. Rough hands, darkness, muffled shouts, and the suffocating feeling of being utterly powerless. He barely had time to register Adriano's name being shouted in the background before he was thrown into the back of a vehicle and blindfolded. Panic overwhelmed him. His heartbeat raced. His heat surged uncontrollably, responding to fear and the lingering memory of Adriano's scent. He whimpered, realizing the full danger of the situation. This is not a prank. This is real. I could die. Meanwhile, Adriano Valente had been monitoring every corner of the city. The moment the alarm sounded, every movement became deliberate, precise, and ruthless. By the time the men had Luca restrained in a safe house, Adriano had already traced them. Every escape route was blocked. Every ally in the city was in motion. And Adriano Valente moved like a storm. He didn't negotiate. He didn't hesitate. He struck. The rescue was brutal and swift. Adriano arrived under the cover of darkness. Shadows bent to his will as he moved through the house, dispatching guards and rivals with a terrifying efficiency. Every movement was calculated. Every strike exact. Luca, bound and terrified, could only watch from the corner as the Alpha entered the room. Gray eyes locked onto him immediately, scanning for injuries, fear, and the faintest signs of trauma. Adriano's voice cut through the chaos. Luca. Yes, Luca whispered, tears streaming down his face. You're safe now, Adriano interrupted, dismissing the attackers with a single motion that sent them sprawling. Guards he had strategically positioned surged in to secure the room. Luca's chest heaved as Adriano approached, slow, deliberate, terrifying. The Alpha's presence alone seemed to fill the room, pushing fear and heat against Luca's body. You came for me? Luca stammered, voice barely audible. I did, Adriano said simply. No pride. No flourish. Just the bare fact. I warned you not to test them. But I told them I would find you. And I did. Luca's body shook with relief, fear, and something else he couldn't name. The Alpha's hand brushed against his wrist as he cut the bindings with a sharp blade. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a shiver through Luca, mixing instinct with the overwhelming safety of being claimed. You called me yours? Luca whispered, almost as a question. Adriano's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. He only looked at him, gray eyes shadowed with intensity, and finally, in a voice low and commanding, said, Yes, I did. And I meant it. The words were simple, yet they carried weight, promise, and warning. Luca's heart thumped painfully in his chest. Fear mixed with relief, confusion, and the first pangs of something he couldn't control. Desire, fascination, and the growing recognition of the Alpha's dominance. That night Adriano stayed close. Not too close. Not overtly but always present, his gaze unflinching, his silence speaking volumes. Luca felt the heat of the Alpha's proximity, the pull in his instincts, and the safety of knowing he was being protected at all costs. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. And it changed something fundamental in Luca. Before he had feared the world. Now he feared nothing, but only because Adriano Valente had made it clear that nothing could touch him while he stood in Adriano's shadow. The Alpha had not only rescued him. He had claimed him in the only way that mattered, by asserting control, protecting him, and making it undeniable that Luca belonged, whether he wanted to admit it or not. And for the first time, Luca realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He wanted to belong. To this man. This dangerous, untouchable, all-consuming Alpha who had just saved his life. The day began like any other, yet Luca Moretti felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. The viral kiss, the bullying, the threats, and the kidnapping, they had all led here. He was about to step into a world that had once humiliated him, a world dominated by cameras, flashing lights, and the scrutiny of millions. Adriano Valente had called a press conference. Luca had tried to protest. I don't belong there, he had said, his voice shaky, hands trembling. You belong with me, Adriano said flatly, his gray eyes unreadable but unyielding. And we will do this on my terms. Or you will remain a target. Do you understand? Luca nodded. He had no choice. The hall was massive, filled with journalists, cameras, and flashing lights. Reporters murmured excitedly as they prepared their notes, smartphones at the ready to capture every moment. A red carpet led to the podium where Adriano would make his announcement. Luca's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to flee, hide, vanish. His heat flared, more intense than ever, triggered by fear and the faint, ever-present scent of Adriano that seemed to radiate even from a distance. When Adriano walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. Cameras focused, microphones leaned forward, and all eyes locked on him. The Alpha Mafia boss looked every bit the predator he was rumored to be, tall, imposing, immaculately dressed, calm, and utterly untouchable. Luca stood slightly behind him, a small figure dwarfed by the Alpha and the enormity of the event. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and more visible than ever before. Adriano turned his gaze toward him for a brief moment, gray eyes softening almost imperceptibly before facing the room again. He spoke. "I did not deny the kiss," Adriano said, his voice calm, controlled, yet carrying the weight of absolute authority. The room went silent, reporters frozen mid-notepad. Not because it was intentional in the way some might assume, but because it was a moment of human error, and because denying it would have endangered him. A ripple of whispers ran through the room. Cameras clicked. Phones raised. The world leaned in. "I want to make one thing perfectly clear," Adriano continued. "Luca Moretti is not a seducer. He did not kiss me for attention. He did not act with malice. He is an innocent party in this situation, and anyone who harms him will answer to me." The words landed like a hammer. Luca's chest tightened. He could barely breathe. The heat in his body flared again, an involuntary response he couldn't control. But alongside the fear was a strange, undeniable warmth. Safety. Protection. Possession. For the first time the narrative began to shift. Social media, once cruel and mocking, began to buzz with a different energy. Clips of Adriano's statements spread quickly, the Alpha defending him publicly, showing strength, control, and a loyalty that no one could argue with. Journalists pressed questions, cameras focused on Luca. One brave reporter asked, "Mr. Valente, does this mean you are claiming Mr. Moretti?" Adriano's eyes flicked to Luca briefly before turning back to the room. His tone was neutral, but each word carried the unmistakable weight of a claim. "Yes," he said simply. "He is mine. That is all you need to know." Gasps echoed through the room. Cameras clicked faster, phones live-streaming the revelation worldwide. Luca felt his face burn, not with embarrassment but with something far more complex. Fear, relief, and a deep, unspoken pull toward the Alpha standing before him. When the press conference concluded, Adriano stepped off the podium and turned to Luca. "No cameras. No witnesses. Just the two of them." "You survived," Adriano said softly, his voice low but commanding. "You did as I instructed." I didn't know what to do," Luca admitted, voice trembling. I was scared." Adriano's gaze softened slightly, just enough that Luca could see a flicker of something human beneath the Alpha's impenetrable exterior. "Good. That fear kept you alive. And now, you are safe. For now." Luca swallowed hard. "And the world knows?" "Yes," Adriano said simply. "And they will not forget. But they will respect you now. Or fear me. Either way, you are protected." Luca's chest tightened as he realized what this meant. He was no longer just the Omega who had accidentally kissed a mafia boss on live television. He was someone defended, claimed, and observed by an Alpha who had chosen him. And when Adriano reached out, brushing a hand against Luca's shoulder, not a touch of ownership, but a subtle tether that made Luca's heart stutter, he realized something that terrified him as much as it thrilled him. He wanted the Alpha. Not because of fear. Not because of survival. But because, somehow, this untouchable, cold, and terrifying man had become the center of his world. And as they left the press conference together, Luca understood something else. The world had seen them. The world had judged him. And the world would never forget. But neither would he. Because for the first time Luca felt safe, wanted, and undeniably, irrevocably tied to Adriano Valente. The morning after the press conference, the world felt quieter. Not silent, but less threatening. Social media still buzzed, headlines had changed, and the viral humiliation had shifted into a tense fascination. The Alpha who claimed his Omega. Luca Moretti woke slowly, sunlight spilling across the room. For the first time in weeks he didn't wake in terror. He didn't wake expecting threats. He didn't wake with shaking hands or a racing heart. Adriano Valente was still asleep in the chair across the room, the Alpha's usual cold expression softened in repose. His jawline caught the light, his gray hair slightly tousled, and Luca's chest tightened involuntarily. He couldn't stop thinking about everything: the kiss, the threats, the kidnapping, the press conference. Everything had led here. Adriano stirred, opening one eye, fixing his gaze on Luca. The Alpha's gray eyes, always sharp, were now softer, more personal. "You're awake," Adriano said, voice low, calm, but carrying the weight of command. "Yes," Luca whispered. His throat was dry, words barely forming. I think I finally feel safe." Adriano's gaze swept over him carefully, unreadable yet intense. "You are. And you will be, as long as you stay near me." Luca felt a strange warmth rush through him at the words. It was not just safety. It was claim, protection, and something else, an undeniable pull that his Omega instincts couldn't deny. You saved me," Luca said softly. "So many times. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Adriano replied. He rose from the chair, every movement precise, elegant, and commanding. "I warned you. You survived. That is enough." Luca swallowed, heart hammering. "And us? I mean, the world saw us. Everyone knows." Adriano's gaze didn't waver. "The world knows what I want them to know. And what matters is that I know." Those words, simple and absolute, struck Luca with force. It wasn't a declaration to the world. It wasn't a press release. It was personal, exclusive, undeniable. And then Adriano took a step closer. Just one. The Alpha's presence filled the room, overpowering yet strangely comforting. Luca's instincts screamed. His heart raced. His body reacted. He tried to speak, but no words formed. "You are mine," Adriano said quietly. "Not by accident. Not because of circumstance. But because I chose you." Luca's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to argue, to deny, but the words were gone. He could only stare, overwhelmed by fear, desire, and a deep, consuming awe. Adriano closed the final distance between them, stopping just a breath away. His hand hovered near Luca's cheek, deliberate and commanding. Luca's skin tingled at the proximity, at the scent, at the raw power radiating from the Alpha. "Do you understand?" Adriano asked, his voice low, sharp, yet intimate. "Yes," Luca whispered. I understand." The tension that had built over weeks, the viral kiss, the bullying, the threats, the kidnapping, the public scrutiny, finally broke. Adriano's hand touched Luca's face, fingers brushing lightly, deliberately. It was no longer accidental. It was intentional, controlled, claiming. Luca leaned into the touch, eyes closing involuntarily. The Alpha's warmth, his presence, his scent, it all overwhelmed him, a mixture of fear, relief, and desire that he could no longer ignore. Adriano's lips followed his hand, descending to press firmly but gently against Luca's. Not accidental. Not fleeting. Intentional. Dominant. Protective. Claiming. Luca's arms wrapped around the Alpha instinctively, responding to a pull he had felt since that very first kiss on live television. Every fear melted into the heat of the moment. Every humiliation, every threat, every tear, forgotten. Because this kiss, this touch, this moment was theirs. When they finally pulled apart, just enough to breathe, Adriano rested his forehead against Luca's, gray eyes locking onto his in a moment of unspoken understanding. "You survived," Adriano said softly. "And now, you are truly mine." "Yes," Luca whispered back, voice trembling. "I'm yours. Always." For the first time, the world outside, the cameras, the headlines, the social media frenzy, didn't matter. It didn't matter that people had watched, judged, or mocked them. Because here, in this room, in this mansion, in this moment, Luca was safe. And he was loved. Not by the world. Not by anyone else. But by the Alpha who had claimed him, protected him, and never let him falter. Adriano's lips brushed Luca's again, softer this time, more intimate, a promise rather than a command. And Luca knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever threats loomed, whatever the world might say or do, they would face it together. Because this time, Luca wasn't alone. He had the Alpha. And the Alpha had him. The mansion was silent around them, the chaos of the outside world fading into irrelevance. For the first time in weeks, Luca allowed himself to breathe, to feel, and to fully embrace the reality that he and Adriano, impossible, untouchable, dangerous Adriano Valente, were finally, undeniably together. And in that moment, nothing else mattered.